If you've been following this series, you know by now that I've been using free patterns to create beautiful coloring books for Amazon KDP. This video is part 4 of the series, and today I'm sharing with you how you can maximize your patterns to create these stunning coloring pages. If this is your first video with me, please watch part 1 of the series so that you can create your coloring patterns for free. That's right, you don't have to spend a dime. You'll absolutely love the contents of part 1, so please stop this video, click the link in the upper right corner to access part 1, and then come back to this one. I know this seems like a lot of work, but if you want to replicate what I'm about to share with you, please, 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 pretty, please go watch part 1. My name is Samantha Boris, and around these parts, I'm known as the Get It Done Girl. If you've not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and share this video so that other author publishers can benefit from the information. To put your patterns together, you will need to have access to Affinity Publisher and Affinity Photo. I know that a lot of people who watch my videos use Affinity Publisher but might not have access to Affinity Photo. If you can afford to get Affinity Photo, that would be a plus. If you cannot, that's understandable. But please watch this video as you'll get something out of it nonetheless. I did try to create the entire process in Affinity Publisher, but I was getting nowhere, so I had to resort to Affinity Photo for the rest of the video. I will be working from a template I created in parts 2 and 3 of the series. If you're already adept at using Affinity Publisher, you really don't need to go back to those tutorials. This is the template I will be using. You don't need these templates to be able to follow along. You can simply watch the process and then create something of your own. I was able to create these inspirational quotes in part 3 of the series. You can watch that video at your convenience if interested. Now let's get to creating my new graphics or coloring pages in Affinity Publisher and also Affinity Photo. So the first line of business is to add a new page, or at least remove or clear masters from an image. I've chosen this one, so I'm just going to clear masters, and this leaves me with a blank page. So what I'm going to do now is to add or place the pattern that I'm working with. Now, as I've mentioned before, if you want to learn how to create unlimited free patterns using a free tool, please go back and watch part 1, since I was able to create these patterns in part 1 of the series, or at least showed you how to create these patterns. So this is the first pattern that I will be working with, and this is what it looks like on my page. To get the look that I'm going for, I'm going to add the picture or a photo of a unicorn I downloaded. I will not be going into details about where I got this from. This is for another video. I'm trying to keep this as concise as possible. So this is the unicorn I downloaded from one of the many sites that I use. So what I'm going to do is to ensure that the unicorn is selected, and I will be double clicking to ensure that I can remove the fill or strip the fill from this unicorn. So I'm going to press Ctrl A to highlight everything, and this is a fill option. I'm going to ensure that it is set to white, and I'm going to go ahead and change the stroke. It is already given a stroke, so I'm just going to increase the width so that it's obvious. Let's see what this looks like at 6 points. So this is what my unicorn looks like. As is, you can leave this, I can leave this, but sometimes I find it beneficial to add an effect to the graphics on my page so that things can at least pop. So what I'm going to do is to ensure my unicorn is selected. I'm going to go to Effects, and I'm going to give it an outline. I can leave it at black and increase the radius. And as you can see, the black, the stroke of my unicorn thickens. Now, the next thing you can do is to access the more features by using the cogwheel on the right. And this is a pop-out box. Sometimes I would change the solid color to a contour. So as you can see, this is what it looks like. Now, if you're not comfortable with this option, you can go ahead and choose solid color. And if you want to leave this without the outline, you can simply deselect the outline option. But I'm just going to leave it for this demonstration. I'm also going to shrink my unicorn so that it fits better on my screen or on my page. So this is it for my first image. Guys, it is this simple. Once you've created your patterns, you can simply add elements to it. Pretty much the same thing I did in part 3 of the series, where I added text to my pattern to create an inspirational quote coloring book. You would not carry over this pattern because, as you can see, these are the same patterns. I'm just using these for demonstration purposes to help you to appreciate that you can maximize your patterns by creating different types of coloring books. Now, as I've mentioned before, I had challenges replicating the look I wanted to share with you in Affinity Publisher. So I had to go ahead and create that look in Affinity Photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove masters or clear the masters from this photo and just use this page instead of creating another one. So clear masters. Now, because I have Affinity Publisher, Designer, and Photo, I do not need to close this program to access Affinity Photo. The good news is I can switch or change personas from Affinity Publisher. Now, on the upper left corner of my screen, this is the persona I'm now working in, which is Affinity Publisher. If I were to switch to Designer, I would have access to Affinity Designer features. And if I am to switch to Affinity Photos persona, I would have access to those features. So if you have all 3 tools, you really do not need to close Affinity Publisher to access Affinity Photo. Like I've mentioned before, if you can afford to get these tools, go ahead and do it. At the moment, I think it's about $50 or $70 something, which is considered cheap if you are really comparing other tools that are mainly subscription based with Affinity's software. So I would get all 3 tools if you can at the moment. If not, it is something I think you should save toward getting. So now that I'm in Affinity Photo, I'm going to go ahead and start creating the second graphic image for my coloring book. So I'm going to just place all the elements or images I am going to be working with on my page instead of having to go back and forth. So I have my teacup or my teapot, and I also, let's add this first. This is the pattern that I will be using. And again, this is another pattern I created using a free tool. If you want to learn how to create these, you will have to watch the video. Let me upload my other image. And this is a PNG file. The pattern that I uploaded is an SVG file, and the teapot is a PNG file. I am going to have to work on my teapot before I can get the look I want. The aim is to add this pattern into my teapot. Now, a lot of persons might say, oh, this is easy. All you have to do is just to drag the shape into the teapot. Well, let's do that and let's see if it works. So this is my shape, and I'm going to drag it just below the teapot it's not working. It's not working. And this is why I was not able to replicate the process in Affinity Publisher, because it's not this easy. So I'm just going to remove the shape from the image. So what I'm going to do is to hide my shape so that I can see what I'm working with. Now, to add my shape to my teapot, I had to use the selection brush tool. And I'm just going to zoom right in so that you can see what I'm doing. This is the selection brush tool. And what I'm going to do is to click in the areas or the spaces to select the space where I want my shape to be added. So that's what I'm doing. Simply selecting the areas. You might not get it right on your first try, but keep at it. I had to go through several tries just to perfect the process. So now that I have everything selected, I'm just going to zoom out a bit and I'm going to show my pattern. The next step is to add a layer, and I'm going to add a new fill layer. So this is what it looks like now. The next thing is to drag my shape into the layer. Let me go again. Change this to black just so that I can see. And this is my shape that I'm trying to add. And as you can see, my shape has been added to my teapot. Now, if you look on the right in the layers panel where I am, you'd realize that I actually dragged the image not at the bottom, but just between the fill and the rectangle box right here. And I'm just going to let it loose. I'm going to click my move tool and let's zoom out. I'm going to press Ctrl D to get rid of my selection lines. Now, this is something that I want to show you because I want you to be aware of this. If I should drag this, it's not a perfect process, but this was how I was able to do it. If I should drag this, you'd realize that everything is messed up. Let me undo, Ctrl Z. Okay, so if you want this to stay as is, you would have to go to File and you would have to export it as an SVG file, but ensure that you're exporting only this page. Another option is to lock the layers so that they do not move. And all you need to do is to come over this section in the layers panel, right click and lock. So this is what I'm doing. I'm locking both layers. And as you can see, I cannot move the image whatsoever. Now, I should have mentioned something before I got to this stage. If you're not able to see your layers panel, you simply have to come to View, Studio, and locate it from the option here. This is the layers option. The layers option is important. The layers panel is important because you will be working with it a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to redo my shape because I did not align the pattern properly on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave the video running so that you see the process, but I will not be talking. So I'm just going to undo. I think this looks better, so I'm going to leave this one, and I'm just going to lock my layers. Control D to deselect, and I'm going to head back to Affinity to Affinity Publishers persona by clicking the icon, and I am back on my page. So there you have it, 2 different ways to really use your free coloring patterns. So you can create as many patterns as you want and add them to different elements. So in part 3, I showed you how to use your pattern to create an inspirational quote coloring book. And in this video, I'm showing you 2 other ways, or I've shown you 2 other ways you can use your patterns. Guys, you will not find any other video on YouTube like this one that gives so much information and value. Please, if you've found the content useful, if you've learned anything, please, I would appreciate if you'd subscribe to my channel and share it if you think others will be able to benefit from it just the same.